So this is a webinar. We do webinar Wednesdays. Grace Church has been sponsoring these. We've done a whole bunch. So if you go over to that'sgrace.org/webinars, the same place that you registered for this, you would actually be able to see all of our past webinars. I think we've done 9 or 10 of these. The next one is coming up. We're doing them in the last Wednesday of the month. The next one that's coming up is the last Wednesday in September, and we're covering how to conquer fear and anxiety. So I think that's going to be super, super helpful. We already have a ton of people signed up for that. But in tonight's webinar, we're going to be covering simple steps to get out of debt. Let me rearrange my windows here so I can see the chat. So quick, just a little bit about me. My name is Brian, as I already said, but I was born in Alaska. Interesting fact, I was almost eaten by a bear in 4th grade. So if you ever meet me at one of the Grace Church locations, I'd love to tell you that story. But 4th grade, walking home from elementary school, I almost got attacked by a bear. I moved to Boston in 2002 for college, because as you can see on the map, Boston is just about as far away from Alaska as you can get, but still be in the US. And Florida was way too hot, so I didn't want to go there. I met my wife in college. That's me and Christy. I don't know what we were doing or what we were wearing, but I asked her to go out my sophomore year, and she put me in the friend zone for another like 5 years. But then persistence paid off, and I wore her down. And now we've been married for going on 12 years now. We have 3 awesome little kiddos, an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And we have a crazy, crazy dog. Her name is Bailey. We thought she was a chocolate Labradoodle, and turns out she's not at all. She is a German poodle pointer, very different dog, but we love her. I helped Grace Church get started about 15 years ago. I'm the executive pastor here at Grace Church. And so this is our very first Sunday, actually. Sean, I don't know what he's doing, going over his message or something, but there is a version of me thinner and with more hair on the top of my head. And when Grace Church first started, I actually built the first website, and it was really, really bad. And it got better over time. I redid it multiple times, but other churches around the country noticed our website and called me. And so I actually ended up quitting my job 3 months after we got married. Christy and I both had massive amounts of student loans, and I had random credit card debt. And so when we got married, one thing we did not think about was that our debts now are combined. And so we had I believe the total was about $130,000, maybe a little bit more in debt. And when I quit my job thinking I could get some more clients and the business would take off, I actually didn't get a new customer for 5 months. And Christy called me crying one night because we had an eviction notice at our apartment. And so that was kind of our wake-up call, was getting that eviction notice and being told by the leasing agent that if we didn't do something that, we'd be kicked out. And so, that was the point in time when Christy and I were like, man, we got to do something. We got to figure out, neither one of us were taught good money management skills from our parents. They don't really teach it in schools. I didn't have a mentor or anything that taught me how to manage money. My mom was a horrible example. She was in debt like crazy, and she would buy stuff on QVC all the time. And she was into these like porcelain dolls. I don't know if you know what those are, but they're creepy, and she had a lot of them. And so she was always buying stuff at like 2 a.m. from QVC. And so that's kind of what I grew up with, was just money was always there, and you just use credit cards and put everything on credit. And so, that was kind of the bottom of the barrel for us. And that's when we're like, man, we got to make a plan and we got to start doing something. And so fast forward 12 years, we're out of debt except our mortgage. And it has allowed us to do a lot of cool things. One of the questions that we asked before this started was, what are some things that would be different if your life if you didn't have debt, right? And we could all come up with all these awesome things that we would love to do if we didn't have that debt kind of looming over us all the time. And so I say all that not to brag or say, look at me, but essentially Christy and I made a ton of mistakes. And my hope is through maybe the next 30, 40 minutes that I can share some of those mistakes and some of the things that we've learned the hard way so that you don't have to. And so my goal is really that the next 30, 45 minutes would be something that I wish I would have had 12 years ago when Christy and I first got married, or maybe even longer than that when I was getting into debt, that somebody would have told me these things. And so what we're going to do here in the next little bit is we're going to go over 3 tips for getting out of debt. Then we're going to go over something called the debt snowball strategy. I'm just reading through this now, and I don't know why I capitalize some things and don't capitalize other things. Then we'll go over some bonus resources. And then at the very end, we'll do some Q&A. So if you have any questions about things as I'm going through them, pop them in the chat. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll go back through those questions. All right. Give me a thumbs up, everyone, if you are ready to go. I see Kenny's on there. He's wondering what the debt snowball is. Kenny, we will cover that right at the end. That's the culmination of what we're doing. That's going to be the cherry on top of everything. Sounds interesting. Getting some thumbs up, some stuff. All right, let's go. So the very first tip for getting out of debt is baby steps. There's a number of baby steps. Most of what I'm talking about tonight is actually I learned through teaching a Financial Peace University class, a Dave Ramsey class for about 9 years. And that's what really helped me and Christy. And so I'm just going to share some of the principles that we learned and some of the things that we've adapted the Dave Ramsey kind of strategy to help our family. But the very first thing that you want to do is you want to start doing a budget. And it's a very specific budget called a $0 budget. Honestly, I had never really done a budget, and me and Christy were really scared the first budget that we did. It was like looking in a Pandora's box. We didn't know what we were going to what we were going to see when we started looking at stuff. But it actually wasn't as bad as we thought. And so after doing the budget, a $0 budget is every dollar has a name and every dollar goes somewhere. The goal of your budget isn't to see how much money you have left at the end. The goal is if you have $100 over, then you budget $100 into savings, right? Or if you go through the budget, and there'll be some resources, we'll give out some budget sheets. But every dollar goes somewhere on purpose, on paper. And so you write that out and you stick to the plan. Now, if you go through the budget and you realize you're $100 over your budget, right, then you go back through the budget and you keep redoing it until you get to 0 at the very end. And then after that, what you're going to want to do, and this is what Christy and I had to do, if you go through and you try to cut things, or you try to get your budget down to 0 and you just keep being under, or you keep having negative left over, right? Or negative $300 or whatever. Then what you have to do is make a prioritized list of all your bills, and you just keep paying those bills until you get to where the money's run out. You make a line right there and you just don't pay those bills. It sounds harsh, but it's just the reality of what you have to do. And so if you follow the Dave Ramsey strategy, what you want to do is you want to pay rent, food, clothing, and utilities first. Then after that, right, then you're paying cable, or you're paying, some other Home Depot. I had a Home Depot credit card. You pay those last, right? Those are the last ones. They're not going to, if you don't pay your rent after a while, they kick you out, right? If you don't pay your utilities, you don't have heat, you don't have electricity. So you got to take care of those 4 things first. Then after that, you can start cutting some things. The next baby step is you want to make sure that you have an emergency fund, and the emergency fund can be different for different families. I would recommend around $1,000, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, depending on what your budget is every month. But what the emergency fund does, and when I first heard this, I was like, I don't believe this. But then it was actually so true. What the emergency fund does, it's like a magic pill. After you have an emergency fund, there's way less emergencies. Why? Because you have money sitting there to take care of things. So here's a perfect example. Christy and I had an old beater Toyota Corolla, and we didn't have any, no savings, no emergency fund. And so every time the Corolla needed something, it was a financial emergency, right? Like, oh crap, the brakes need to be done or the exhaust needs to be done. So then the financial emergency also made like a relationship emergency, because now we're like mad at each other, or we're frustrated because we don't have enough money, and we're arguing about other things now because the money thing started it. And so it's like magic. When you have the emergency fund, all of a sudden, hey, the brakes need to be done. It's going to be $200. Okay. We have it sitting there, and all of a sudden things aren't an emergency anymore. And so that's probably one of the biggest things that can bring you like financial peace of mind, is having that emergency fund. Next thing you're going to want to do is cut up your credit cards. We're talking about getting out of debt, right? So if you have your credit cards, you're going to get further into debt. So cut up the credit cards, live on the emergency fund, use your budget, and don't rely on credit cards anymore. If anyone has any questions about these or needs anything clarified, go ahead and pop those in the chat. The next thing you're going to want to do, tip number 2 here to getting out of debt, is you're going to want to, you can try to increase your income. Now I did this, right? Getting some sort of side hustle. I did odd jobs. I got a job at IKEA. Like I did things to try to increase our income, right? We went through the budget and we kept being negative $100, $200 every single month. Well, we can cut things, we can not pay certain things, but we also tried to increase our income. I personally did that by working at IKEA and working at a few other like weird side job things. I know a guy who has 3 kids, and he was in debt and going through this, and he ended up literally knocking on doors in his neighborhood to mow lawns, and was making an extra $100 a weekend. He was a 40-year-old dude that had 3 kids and was a professor at a college, but he needed extra income. And so he was mowing lawns in his neighborhood. Like, you do whatever you can to just get a little bit of extra money. I also know a lady who, in her kind of in between times, she started doing Instacart and was making $200 a day. Whenever she would want to work, she could make $200 a day doing Instacart. I know another, almost 60-year-old lady who is doing Uber Eats, and literally just picking up odd times when it's in between things in her schedule, and she'll go do an Uber Eats run and make 15, 20 bucks every time that she kind of turns on the app and takes some rides. So there's a lot of creative ways that you can do a lot of creative things you can do as a side hustle. The other thing you can do, which it may or may not work, is you can ask for a raise. Right? I did that when I was in college. I worked at the Gap, and my brother-in-law said, hey, you should ask for a raise. And I thought, man, making $8 an hour or whatever, what am I going to ask for? He said, you should ask for 20. What's the worst they could say? No. So actually I went in and I asked for $20 an hour working at Gap. This was like, 17 years ago. And she laughed at me and said, why would I pay you that much? And so I told her, I'm a college kid. I am pretty straight-laced. I'm not coming in late. I'm not coming in drunk or high. And my availability is wide open. So I can pick up any shift you want, work anytime you want. I'm never going to turn down a shift. And she said, well, I can't pay you 20, but I can pay you $17 an hour. I'm more than almost doubled my income just by asking for it and telling her that I was fully available. So you never know. You could ask for a raise. It may work. The other thing, which is kind of counterintuitive, is stop investing, right? If you're investing now through your paycheck or something like that, 2%, 3%, stop that now, because what you're paying in debt and interest is probably more than whatever you're going to get through investing. And so I'm not saying don't invest. You definitely can invest once you're out of debt. And if you follow the debt snowball, you actually get out of debt a lot quicker than you think you will. And so you're just going to stop investing for just a short amount of time until you can get out of debt, and then you can stop investing. The other thing you can do is sell stuff. Yard sale, Facebook market, anything you can do to just get a little bit of extra cash, especially if you're only, if you're over budget by only $100 or $200 a month. There's a lot of things you can do to get that extra income. I was just talking to a buddy of mine last week who his son wanted some money. And so his son went and made a yard sale and literally went knocking on doors telling people that he has stuff for sale down the road, and he made $80. So I'm sure that you can clear out your garage, clear out your basement, and make a little bit of extra cash on stuff that probably you're not really using anyways, right? So that's all under increase your income. Now there's two ways to do this. You can either increase your income, right? We're talking about getting out of debt. And if you're under budget, or if you're always, in the hole every month, there's two things you can do. You can either increase your income or decrease your expenses. That's the next tip here. Decrease your expenses. The biggest thing that Christy and I did was we cut cable 10 years ago. We lived in Stonehend's Apartments down by Cobb Corner, and I forget what it was. I think we were going through this Dave Ramsey course, and one of the things that they said was, cable, try to switch your cable company. So I thought I was all smart, and I called Comcast or Verizon or whoever it was, and I said, hey, I want to break in my, I want to lower my bill. And they said, oh, give us your address. And I told them where we lived, and he said, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And I was kind of taken aback. I was like, what do you mean you can't do that? Like, I'm just asking for something off. And I said, well, fine then, I'm going to go with Verizon. And he said, actually, Comcast is the only provider for your apartment complex. So it's either us or nothing. And I was too stubborn to keep cable. So we cut it. We ended up saving $200 a month from that. And we have never looked back. We have not had cable since. And that's been 10 or 11 years now. We pay for basic internet, and then we have Hulu and Netflix and Amazon Prime for other reasons, but Amazon Prime comes with all the video stuff. And so I think Hulu right now is running a deal for Hulu and Disney Plus for like $12 a month or something. So, I mean, you can save massive amounts of money just by cutting cable. The other huge thing, now probably most of us aren't eating at Ruth Chris, but is cutting out restaurants. Did you know the average American spends about $300 a month, a little over $300 a month eating out? That's crazy, right? So that's another thing that over the years I've done some counseling with people or families about budgeting. And one of the things that I asked them for is why don't you come in and look at and bring like 2 or 3 months worth of bank statements, and we'll just go through them line by line and really get a handle on where your money is going. And every single time we do it, without doubt, everyone is shocked at how much they spend eating out. Because it's just, it's $20 here, $30 there, and you do it for convenience because you're running late or whatever, and it's just over the month it adds up to a lot. And so if you can do meal planning, you can really cut your expenses down by not eating out. If you do some simple meal planning, this is one of the things that Christy still does for our family is meal planning. And one of the things that we learned through this was you can use things like Instacart or some sort of delivery service for food. And although it's more expensive, whatever you buy, right? You put in your grocery order. If you went to the grocery store and bought those exact same things, the bill would come out less. But what ends up happening is when you go to the grocery store, sometimes you make a whole bunch of purchases that you didn't plan on making, right? You grab some ice cream, you grab this, oh, I think we need some more of that. And so you actually end up spending more. So sometimes using a delivery service, even though it has a fee attached to it, may actually save you money because you're not doing the impulse buys and you're saving time by not going to the store. And so Christy and I still use that now. We use delivery services because one, it saves time, but also we end up not making any of those impromptu purchases. And so it ends up being great for us. Another thing that's a personal thing for me is cutting out coffee. Not cutting out coffee at all, cutting out Dunkin's and Starbucks, right? If you're in New England, I know there's a person in Wisconsin that's watching with us tonight. Maybe Starbucks is more prevalent where you are, but out here, literally, I think Stoughton, I counted the other day, I believe Stoughton has 6 Dunkin' Donuts in it. And so it's just crazy. Literally, there's a Dunkin' Donuts everywhere, and it's convenient and it's easy, and sometimes it's tasty. But I was spending a ridiculous amount of money at Starbucks. And so, doing coffee at work or coffee at home actually saves quite a bit of money when you add that up over the month. Another thing that we started doing is we started shopping at secondhand stores for our kids. And if you're local, there's one in I think it's in Bridgewater and West Bridgewater, or maybe just Bridgewater, but it's called Keeping Pace, keepingpace.org. There are actually people in our church that run this, and it is super affordable. Our kids love it. It's good quality clothes. And it's literally saved us hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars over the year. It's in West Bridgewater, Kirby. Cool. I think they have 2 locations, or maybe it's just one now. I'm not sure, but if you go to keepingpace.org, I believe is the website, you can see everything there. But our kids love going there. It's great. Oh, they just moved to a larger. That's awesome. Yeah, they needed to, because the place that it was before was cramped. But if they're in a better space now, that's even better. But that can literally, especially if you have kids, Kirby, I know you have like 15 kids. It can save a ton of money by going there and getting shirts for $2, right? Getting pants, for $1 or $2 or whatever. And so that can just save a massive amount of money. So to review the steps so far, we talked about baby steps, right? Doing budgeting. We talked about, once you start doing your budget, if you're always in the hole, there's 2 things you can do. You either increase your income, sell some stuff, part-time job, ask for a raise, or you can decrease your expenses by cutting cable, cutting out to eat, stuff like that. Just go through your budget. If you're doing your budget every single week, which I would recommend, starting doing your budget every single week, do your budget until it becomes a habit. Then you can start doing it once a month. But for the first probably 2 or 3 months, you should do it every single week to know when things are coming out. It just takes a while to really get a handle on your money. Then once it becomes a habit, then it goes a lot faster and you can start doing it every month instead. But start doing a budget all the time, and then, either increase your income or decrease your expenses. And then this is the key, the debt snowball. Kenny, you are going to love this. So debt snowball. This is, I don't know if Dave Ramsey coined this phrase or if he just capitalized on it, but essentially, right, it's the idea of a snowball rolling downhill. It starts off small, but each rotation, it starts gaining momentum and gaining speed. And so what you want to do first for the debt snowball is you want to list out all of your debts. And this is somewhat counterintuitive. Some people think that you should start paying your debts by what has the greatest percentage or what has the greatest interest. But actually, you should start with the one that's the least amount of money, right? So if it's a Home Depot card or a gas credit card that has $500 on it or whatever, that's the one that you should start with. So start paying the minimum on everything. And then what you're going to do is as you pay that first one off, so let's say it's a gas card or something like that, you would take that $25 or $30, whatever it is, the minimum payment, and you're going to add it to the next one, right? So you can kind of see in the diagram that once you pay something off, you take the money that you were paying that for every month for that credit card, and you add it to the next one, right? Then you start paying off. Like for me, it was a Home Depot card that I think we paid like $27 a month on. And then the next one for us was my wife's wedding rings. That was Kay's Jeweler or something like that, or Jared's, that we had to pay off. And then, right, so you're paying, $25 on Home Depot. You're paying $30 on the wedding rings or whatever. Well, you just add that 25 from Home Depot to the wedding ring, and all of a sudden you're essentially making double payments on the wedding ring, right? Now you're just going to pay that off super fast, right? So then it just keeps snowballing, right? Then all of those things you use to pay off the car. Then once the car's paid off, well, now you're talking about you may have $300 or $400 extra a month to put on something else, right? You just keep rolling it over. Every time something gets paid off, you roll over the payments onto the next thing. And then literally you just rinse and repeat. You keep doing that until you're out of debt. I have a buddy of mine who I won't use his name, but as a life choice, they decided that she wasn't going to work, but he only makes, I want to say, between $40,000 and $50,000 a year, which out here is not a lot. And they're making it work, and they're debt free because they did this debt snowball, right? They literally on his salary were able to pay off all of these things, pay off the car, pay off student loans, pay off all these things. Now they're debt free, and now they're looking to buy a house, right? So I mean, it really can work if you follow these simple steps. So that's it. The resources that we have here, I thought this would go a lot longer, but we flew through this. If you guys have questions, put them up in the chat. All the resources that I would really point you to would be daveramsey.com. And there are, let me see here. There are some ones, I'll put them in the chat, but there's specific ones that you can go through for budgeting. They have a budget sheet that you can go through. I just put some links in the chat. If you're watching on replay, I'll also put these in the show notes. But if you go to these, one of the biggest questions we get about budgeting all the time is, well, I own a business, and so my income is sporadic. I don't know exactly how much I'm going to make every month, or maybe you work in sales or something like that where you get commissions and it's different. And so I used that for a while as an excuse to not do a budget. And so, I use that essentially as a crutch not to look in Pandora's box to figure out how to manage my money. But it's actually super easy. And there's a different budgeting form for people that have sales or their own business. And so that's in there as well. There's more resources on the debt snowball. And then there's some budgeting guides that you can download there. But Dave Ramsey is definitely what I would recommend for anyone looking at this. He has a podcast as well that you can listen to, wherever you're at. I believe he's on the radio. I don't know if he's on the radio out here in Boston, but you can definitely catch it online anywhere. And he essentially just takes questions from the audience about essentially anything that you would have that I probably wouldn't be able to answer. He would be able to answer that. And yeah, I just highly recommend Dave Ramsey. Our church will be doing a Dave Ramsey course. It's going to be a Zoom course, so it's a little bit different because of COVID. We're going to be doing it virtually. And I have all of your guys' email. So when that starts again, Pastor Stephen from the West Bridgewater location is probably going to be heading that up again. And so we will probably start that in October, I believe, September or October. And it goes for about 9 weeks. And it's all virtual. And so what you'll do is you actually watch the lesson online anytime during the week. And then you get together for the Zoom call for about 30 minutes to go over the discussion questions. And then just check in with each other. Is everyone doing their budget? Does anyone have any questions? And so the last time we did this, I believe we did this in May or June. We had about 45 people go through it, and it was super, super awesome. Tons of helpful information. There's stuff that we didn't even cover in here about debt consolidation and things like that, tactics that they use if you're really behind on a credit card, tactics that they use that you can actually kind of get away from. And so it's really, really helpful, especially if you're super in debt and there's collectors coming. Then I would highly recommend this. It does cost money. So that's usually the biggest pushback that people have. It costs around $100, maybe a little bit less, but I know that it is worth it. And the reason it's worth it is because when things are free, sometimes you don't value them. So it seems weird or counterintuitive almost to say, hey, I'm super in debt. So I want to get out of debt. So I have to pay $100 to learn about how to get out of debt. It's not necessarily about paying $100. It's about putting your money where your mouth is. And if you truly do want to get out of debt, then you will invest in it, right? You will invest in a strategy and a plan to help you get out of debt. And so literally in the first month, you will save more than the $100 that you paid into the course, just in the first 2 or 3 lessons that you'll learn through the course. So I know that's usually the biggest push. The first week, I believe, is absolutely free. And so you can check it out. And if you don't think it's valuable, then it is what it is. There's tons of free stuff online. So if you go to Dave Ramsey, a ton of free stuff, but I do highly recommend joining the course. I'm not a salesman. I'm not getting a kickback for that or anything. I just truly believe it because it really did change my life. It changed me and my wife's life forever. And the fact that we are debt-free except our investment properties is pretty darn awesome. And it's allowing us to do a lot of things that as, 37-year-old, I never thought that I would be able to do at my age because I don't have debt, because we paid off our student loans, because we paid off cars, because we don't have a lease, because of all these things. We're able to have a different lifestyle than most of my friends. And, they look at me and say, how in the world are you doing that? Well, I'm not paying thousands of dollars a month in debt to things. And so either way, I highly recommend Dave Ramsey. There's some other books that I actually would recommend a lot. Obviously, one is the Dave Ramsey book, Total Money Makeover. But another one is called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And this necessarily isn't about budgeting, but it's more about just having financial wisdom. And Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it really did speak to me. Not to get into my whole story, but my dad died when I was 7. And so I was raised by a single mom who was horrible at money. She got a really big payout from insurance after my dad died. And 3 years later, all the money was gone. And we had to move because we lost the house. And so that's kind of how I grew up looking at money. And the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he talks about, it's fictional, but he talks about his biological dad had a poor mindset, but his friend's dad had a rich mindset. And so he talks about the difference, the different lessons that he learned from his rich dad and his poor dad. And so it talks a lot about investing and just financial wisdom, essentially. And then the other one that I would highly recommend is called The Richest Man in Babylon. And this is more story format, which a lot of people like that. It's kind of like a parable, but it literally follows the life of the richest man in Babylon thousands of years ago, and this kid who wants to learn from him. So he essentially becomes kind of his apprentice, and he learns, I believe it's 7 things that he learns from the richest man in Babylon. And they're principles that no matter where you are, how much money you have, or where you live, that they're principles of building wealth anywhere. And so those are the books that I would recommend. Any questions? Let me go back through. Kenny, you get that about paying for the course? Yeah, I really do believe that you will get more out of it if you pay because you actually invested in it. Let me see. Kenny, you found their address for Keeping Pace. Kenny's on it. See here, AT&T. Yeah, phone bills. Phone bills are another thing that you can use to really cut down on your expenses. I know a guy, I forget. Oh, Kenny. There's a guy that posted online about a phone company that was like $30 a month or something like that for your family. But there's definitely ways to save. I know Verizon is like ripping us off right now. So that's one of the things we're trying to do is trying to switch over. I know the other thing that Visible, that's right. Visible is the name of that company. Another pushback that we get a lot from when I recommend people cut cable, right? They freak out about sports. I won't be able to watch my sports. I won't be able to watch my sports. Maybe I'm just not man enough, but if you think, is sports worth $200 a month, $250 a month? I just don't see that being worth it, right? Especially when you can go over to a friend's house, or you can, well, with Hulu, you can pay a little bit extra to get Hulu Live. I think Hulu Live is like $45 a month. And so, man, it's just, if you really want to get out of debt, then watching sports is not worth, $200 a month. I just don't think that. I see Paul. Do we have any ways besides Zoom? Paul, are you talking about the course? I'd love to do the course. Any ways besides Zoom? With COVID right now, I don't think so. Usually with Financial Peace University, like I said, I led it for about 9 years. We did it in person, but now with COVID, I think it's just the best way to do it. I know for our churches, we're not allowed to open for anything besides worship services. So we can't really open up our facilities to do things like that. And so, yeah, I think Zoom would be the best. But I mean, you can do Zoom on your phone or on anything. If you're watching this webinar, you could do Zoom. So $100 versus $200 is a no-brainer for sure. All right, guys. Well, if there's no other questions, I'll stay on a little bit longer if you want. I don't see any more questions coming through. I'm scrolling back up through. I thought I saw one about 401ks, but I don't see it on here. Oh, Steve. So work injury and still on workers' comp or over my 401k into a personal IRA. My settlement will go through Roth. Man, that's a question for a financial advisor, Steve. His question is, he rolled over his 401k into a personal IRA, and he looks like he's about to get a settlement from something that will go into a Roth IRA. It really just depends on how market savvy you are, I think. There's some people that have a self-managed IRA that they can do real estate investing in, but that would be something for your financial advisor that would have, way more information. I know, Steve, you and I talked at the Bridge about a month ago. And so I think you do have a lot of opportunities, but I would definitely get in touch with the financial advisor to figure that out. Yeah, Hulu Live is super simple. So Hulu is essentially an app that you can get for your TV. I'm so cheap that I don't even have a smart TV. I have a dumb TV that does not have apps, but I have an old Xbox that we use that we hook up to the TV in the basement. And you can download apps on the Xbox. And so we use Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime Video, all that kind of stuff. But essentially it's an app that you would download for your TV. You can also do Roku. I believe there's also Vudu TV, VUDU, I think. And that's free. My in-laws have Vudu on their TV, and it has a bunch of free stuff. And also NBC just came out with Peacock, which is all free. So there's tons of options for cutting cable. Cutting cable is such a huge thing now. I was reading an article the other day. I think they said most people under 30, the majority of people under 35 don't have cable. They don't have cable and they don't have landlines. And so, yeah, tons of ways. Yeah, Kenny, with the Peacock app, I haven't tried it yet. Valerie, how long did it take for you to pay everything off? So for us, we had my student loans, Christy's student loans, credit card debt. I had a car payment, and it took us 6 years to pay everything off, 7 years to pay everything off. And then our next car that we bought was a Nissan Armada, huge, we call it the tank. And we paid cash for that. We did not get into debt for that. and it's through the debt snowball. You start, that snowball keeps picking up speed, right, every time you go off it. So when you're down to the last few things that are a good chunk of money, I mean, you're paying thousands of dollars a month towards it, and you're paying the interest. But the interesting thing is, all the extra money that you're paying is going towards principal. So you're actually ending up paying it so much faster than what you think. And so that's why the debt snowball, I think, works so well. What's the debt snowball, Paul? That's something that we just covered. You have to watch that in the replay. But essentially, it's the idea of, you're starting with your smallest debt amount. You're paying the minimum on everything. And you list them in order from least to greatest amount of debt. And as you pay off that first one, that minimum payment rolls over to the next one. You pay that one off, and then both of those minimum payments roll over to the third one, and it starts picking up speed every rotation. And so by the end, you're paying a lot of money towards the principal, and you're paying off the debt a lot faster. But like I said, you can watch the replay, Paul, and the replay will get sent out to you tomorrow. There'll be a replay link. But awesome. If there's anything else that you guys need, I'll put my email in here. It's pretty easy, brian@thatsgrace.org. You guys can email me anytime. I'm not an expert. I have taught the Dave Ramsey course 11 times. And so if there's anything that I can be help to, I would love to. If there's not, then I can definitely try to find the answer. Kenny, how do we find out about the course? Sign up for detailed schedule. I was talking with Pastor Stephen today, and he's not sure when he's going to start it. So what I'll do is I'll promise to keep everyone that signed up for this webinar, I will keep everyone up to date on when that's going to start. I believe, I'm not making any promises, but I believe it's starting at the end of September. And last time, I think they picked like a Tuesday night, but they'll figure out whatever the best night for everyone is. And then that's the time that they'll meet. All right. Thanks everyone for watching. Like I said, I'll put all the links and stuff in the show notes if you're watching on replay. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me, brian@thatsgrace.org. All right. Thanks everybody. Have a great night.